Going into your work at the Philadelphia Community Bail Fund, you've seen and heard of all the different horrible living conditions in these jails. But now that we're in a pandemic, these conditions have gotten even more complicated. What can you tell us about the way that jails have responded to COVID, and what are these current living conditions like?
Yeah, and so Philadelphia, like many cities, had a really slow response to COVID-19 because when it first, came into real public consciousness, we were really concerned that we knew this is going to be really bad news for our loved ones who are behind bars
Mm-hmm.
because we knew that they're already in living conditions where they're overcrowded, people can't socially distance. One of the largest jails in Philadelphia is like dormitory style, so people are in bunk beds in like large rooms. There really is no space to be apart. Everyone's living on top of one another. Um, and we know that Philadelphia, you know, as one of the poorest large cities in the country, also has years of suffering from environmental racism. So most of the people in jail are black and brown. Most of the black and brown people in Philadelphia have asthma. So we're like a respiratory disease um, that spreads from close contact with one another is not going to be good news for us. So we started pushing the DA, the mayor, the judges, and the first judicial district to do all they could to respond. So to review cases to like make sure you can let out as many people as possible who one are just there on cash bail, who might only have like 6 months left in their sentence, who are medically vulnerable or elderly, and so we had car caravans where people were coming out, um, hundreds of people in their cars circling City Hall while the mayor is giving his COVID press briefings every Tuesday. And so we're out there making noise, like making coffins when the first person died from COVID, and literally chasing a judge who's responsible for keeping them in inside from the courthouse to her car.
Oh my
Letting her
gosh.
know that this woman's blood is on your hands because you guys have not like responded to do what you can to let these people free. Like the first black woman who died of COVID, the first person that died from COVID in the jails in Philly, um, she was like medically vulnerable. Only had a few like months left to her sentence. Had put in petitions to be let go, because of her medical condition, because she was so close to the end of her sentence, and it was denied. So their response was really slow, and it was to get out some makeshift mask, made from old bed sheets and whatnot.
Wow.
It was, for some reason, the women used to have their own prison called the Riverside Correctional Facility, one of the most modern of the jails in Philadelphia. One of the only jail that had air conditioning, for instance. It was built like in the early 2000s. For some reason, they decided to move all the women from that facility um, and move them to the detention center, one of the worst prisons in Philadelphia, that was the subject of several lawsuits. Currently, a lawsuit too about them not improving prison conditions there. They moved women there. They moved women to one of the old abandoned jails that basically people thought had been condemned. They opened that jail back up, which is basically a bunch of trailers, and were putting women there in these horrible conditions where they didn't have clean water. This was in the winter when they moved them. They didn't have heat. They There was like trees growing through some of the cells, like vegetation from
Oh
outside,
my
because they were
gosh.
like abandoned for a long time. They were in disuse. Um, Vermin infestations, cockroaches, and then also you've seen, these drug conditions that people are all living in are getting much worse. And so it's been sort of a slow moving tragedy because we've been raising the alarm since March 2020 that something has to be done. And they had like a really brief moment early in the pandemic where the Philadelphia police decided to stop arresting people. Well, jailing people that they arrested. They would just give them a citation, so they could come back for a court date or pay a fine. They wouldn't go to jail or be held. And when they did that policy, the jail population in Philly dropped dramatically because most people who are in jail in Philadelphia are there awaiting trial. Um, there are very few people who have short sentences that are serving less than 2 years, but most people are pre-trial. So without new people coming in, the jail population dropped dramatically, which we thought was a great thing. And then the DA and the judges started reviewing some cases to see who they could let go. But, they only let go like a couple hundred people. And the Philadelphia jail population, like right now, is above 4,000 people. So it's higher than it was pre-COVID right
Wow.
now. And so, and as we know, we've heard for people who are inside, for people who have recently gotten out that we were able to post bail for that the jail conditions are only getting worse. And that the overcrowding still remains an issue. People aren't getting cleaning supplies. They're not getting new masks. Um, they're no longer getting hot food because a lot of people who are on staff, they're not coming in. So, people getting like, yeah, not getting hot food because, they don't have the staff there to like make it or send it in. Not like the food was good anyway. People aren't getting any time outside of their cells. So like they might get 15 to 30 minutes like every couple of days, and then just really use that time to shower, to call your lawyer, to call your loved ones. So many people haven't been in touch with their loved ones on the outside. Like one thing, when people call us for bail support, we try to talk to our loved ones, and one of the things we ask them is, when is the last time that you spoke to them? And like, many people that we bailed out this fall was just like, I haven't been able to keep in touch with him at all. I haven't heard from him at all. So it's been a real problem where people are basically in lockdown, and they've been in lockdown for basically the last like almost 2 years now. So it really is like a horrible problem, especially for people who are um, sick or elderly. And we've bailed out, now we've bailed out 737 people um, so far. And one of the people that we bailed out last, he was a 75-year-old man. He has kidney failure. He was in hospital because he caught an infection from dialysis, and he was held on a $250,000. This wheelchair bound man who's been in and out of the hospital. We've had people there who were held on $30. They didn't have $30 in their name to get out, and they had been there for like 6 months before like someone heard about the bail fund
Oh my
and
gosh.
contacted us. So we've we've posted as little as $30 to get someone out, and for one woman as much as $100,000. And this was during COVID to get them out of jail. So it's a real problem in Philadelphia, and a lot of people that we see who like find out about us like have a lot of like medical conditions. They're like parents, mothers, sometimes they're pregnant women. There's been many pregnant women we bailed out. So it's yeah, not to say that it's unjust just because they're vulnerable people, but like there's vulnerable people who are locked up, and there are people who like before they went in they were healthy, but once you're in jail in that conditions, not getting adequate food, the facilities aren't clean. Right now, what we're seeing is that they're really the jails are violent places because they don't have many correctional officers that are on board. You have a lot of uh, prisons that we're hearing that certain blocks don't have any staff sometimes. So like people are locked in all day, and there's been a lot of interpersonal violence between the inmates. And so several people in the last couple of months have died due to violence in Philadelphia jail, just because there's been this like lack of staff, there's been this lack of oversight, there's been people injured in the cell. People have been crying out for medical help, and no one will come to the person until it's too late. So it's been a really awful in Philly. There's been many lawsuits, protests. There was a protest this Thursday about what's happening down there. And unfortunately, while the people are waking up and hearing what we're saying and they're concerned, and a lot of people have been donating to us, and so that's not been a problem. The problem has been that the mayor, the district attorney, the judges who are in charge of the first judicial district, they just don't seem to care about people who are locked up. It's like they cease to be human to them. Um, and they don't understand the extra justice in that, 9 out of 10 people held in a Philly jail are there pre-trial. So like they haven't had a day in court. According to the law, they're innocent. So it's sort of like you are accused of something, the police arrest you, you can't afford to pay the $5,000 to get out. That's the most common bail amount that we have to pay. And so you're stuck in jail for like a month, 2 months, 6 months, 12 months, waiting for your court date. In the meantime, you've lost your house. If you have children, you've probably lost custody of them and they're in foster care now. You've lost your job. And then, by the time you do get out, because your case has been dismissed or withdrawn, or you finally get your day in court, your life is in shambles. And it's not like, the system steps up to help, repair the life that they've broken. There's no like compensation for this. There's no support for helping people get back on their feet once they've been through this process. And so it's, especially in a city with such a high poverty rate, this is something that perpetuates poverty. It puts people in poverty. Like a lot of people who are just on the margins, something like this will like, drop you back down into a hole you can't get out of. So yeah, I know I talked a lot on that one question, but it's, we have seen an increase in need during COVID, not a decrease, just because the system has not responded in any way to sort of alleviate what's happening or to decrease the number of people who are incarcerated. Their answer has been a little bit of like mask and cleaning supplies that they're giving out and vaccines. So now that the vaccine is out, people have access to them, which is good. But what we see is a lot of people who are in prison don't trust, not so much the vaccine, but they don't trust the prison officials giving them the vaccine, because it's just a system that already has a history of being woefully inadequate, like just incapable of treating their most basic medical need. And so, yeah, I'm not going to trust them to give me this injection, so it's, I wouldn't say that even now that we have the vaccines, things have improved much. They've been testing people for COVID, but again, what would be a proper response would be to free people, to let people go, especially since the vast majority of people who are in jail in Philadelphia don't need to be in jail for anyone's safety or for them to return to court. There's other things that we can do to ensure people return to court, since that's supposed to be the reason why people have bail, because bail is supposed to be a surety that a person will return to court for all their court days. But in Philadelphia, it just acts as a way to incarcerate people pre-trial, because so many people can't afford the bails that they are given, so they end up just waiting.